The Oracle Network.
Hey, Rainbow Warriors. This is my disclaimer. Beyond the Rainbow is a true crime podcast. It's not suitable for young children, and maybe not even for some adults. I tend to swear like a sailor, and I'm kind of proud of that. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, Rainbow Warriors, and welcome to Beyond the Rainbow, True Crimes of the LGBTQ+. I'm your host, CJ. When you get a chance, please follow me on the socials. I'm on Facebook at Beyond the Rainbow, Twitter, TikTok, and Tumblr as Rainbow Crimes, Instagram as Rainbow Crimes 12, and YouTube as Rainbow Crimes Unicorn Justice. If you'd like to help this one-woman researched, written, recorded, edited, and produced show, please take a look at my merch store under Rainbow Crimes at TeePublic. Another way to show your support is to buy me a cup of coffee. I love coffee. buymeacoffee.com/Rainbow Crimes offers listeners a way to support the show without breaking the bank. Other great ways to support the shows you listen to is by leaving a 5-star review. It helps the podcast algorithm gods and goddesses find the podcast. Gaining visibility for often overlooked victims of the LGBTQ+ community is my goal for Beyond the Rainbow. And finally, if you could please tell a friend, pass the word along. Let's get these stories heard. Thank you, my warriors. If you'd like to be a part of this show and tell of a missing but not forgotten LGBTQ+ person, please DM me on the socials. Or email me through my website at beyondtherainbowpodcast.com. From there, I will send you a script, and all you have to do is read it, record it, and email it back to me. You don't need fancy equipment. Just record it on your phone or computer. It's that simple. It's a pretty wild ride when people use movies or television shows to inspire them to murder someone.
I know some killers have used the show Dexter or Breaking Bad as their murder muses.
This episode, one story will include how a movie about witchcraft was the inspiration to kill.
And our other story will be about a witch cult whose leader encouraged his members to kill. In many cases, movies can be based off of true crime or paranormal occurrences. And in other instances, a crime can be inspired by a movie. The movie Practical Magic motivated one woman to attempt to murder her husband by using witchcraft. Let's get into it. Heather was born in Daytona Beach, Florida in 1974. Her mom was working as a waitress, and her father walked out on them when Heather was still in diapers. Heather said she constantly struggled with depression and attempted to complete suicide when she was only 13 years old. Eventually, Heather's mom moved her little family to Quakertown, Pennsylvania. It was a great place, but nothing to do for teenagers except find some trouble to get into. Heather was 14 and obviously didn't know anyone there. It wasn't long after this that Heather left school completely. At 17, she started working. In 1993, at a seafood restaurant in Quakertown, Pennsylvania, 2 employees, Kevin and Heather, met. Heather was a server, and Kevin, a former Marine with a degree in accounting, was the manager. Heather had been in a relationship that was extremely abusive, but from that, she did birth a daughter. So, at the time, she was a single mother. As stressful and difficult as it was, she was making a great effort to do the best she could for herself and her daughter. Eventually, she and Kevin Miller started falling head over heels for each other, and in 1995, they got married. It was said to be a fairy tale wedding. Soon they would have a baby together, and in Richland Town, they purchased a townhouse. Things were going remarkably well so far. Heather was pregnant again, and they were so happy. Kevin had even adopted Heather's child from her previous abusive relationship. However, only a few weeks after buying their house, Kevin lost his job as a computer consultant. Their marriage took a nosedive from there. They were both under a ton of pressure, and when this happens, it will either bring a couple closer together or tear them apart. Kevin began busting his butt, working 80-hour weeks with 2 jobs. This kept him away from home a lot, but he was doing what he felt he needed to for his family to basically survive. This did cause a strain on the marriage because Heather wasn't getting the time and attention that she desired with her husband, and neither were the children. Neighbors even knew something was terribly wrong because they could hear the extremely loud and hostile fighting. Kevin kicked his pregnant wife out of the home after one argument, and Sandy, one of the neighbors, took Heather in. Sandy said you could always hear him screaming, always venting on somebody. Supposedly, Heather went to a woman's shelter, but they wouldn't assist her since she wasn't being harmed physically. Heather would have filed for a divorce, but unfortunately, she did not have enough money for an attorney. A woman named Mindy was her closest friend, and she was also a Wiccan. Reportedly, she also practiced black magic. Heather had told Mindy how unhappy she was and desperately wanted out of the marriage. After she told Mindy what was going on, she suggested that they should watch a movie to get Heather's mind off of everything. They ended up watching Practical Magic. In the movie, one of the characters is in an abusive relationship, and one of her sisters tries to help her get out of that relationship. To help her sister, she puts a poisonous plant, belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade, into the man's drink, which kills him. Now, for those who may not know exactly what belladonna is and what its main use is for, belladonna is a plant, and its leaf and root are used to make medication. A long time ago in Italy, belladonna berry juice was used to make women's pupils expand, which was to give them an extra stunning look, which was quite dangerous because they were putting juices from a poisonous plant into their eyes. In 2010, the FDA started becoming more strict about the homeopathic infant teeth tabs and gels because they may have had imprecise amounts of belladonna in them. According to WebMD.com, though widely regarded as unsafe, belladonna is taken by mouth as a sedative, also to stop bronchial spasms and asthma and whooping cough, as well as a cold and hay fever remedy. It's also used for Parkinson's disease, colic, inflammatory bowel disease, motion sickness, and as a painkiller as well. Belladonna is used in ointments that are applied to the skin for joint pain, pain along the sciatic nerve, and general nerve pain. Belladonna is also used in medicine-filled gauze applied to the skin for mental disorders, inability to control muscle movements, excessive sweating, and asthma. You can also find belladonna in suppositories for hemorrhoids. Still sourcing from WebMD, belladonna has chemicals that can block functions of the body's nervous system. Some of the bodily functions regulated by the nervous system include salivation, pupil size, digestive functions, red dry skin, fever, fast heartbeat, inability to urinate or sweat, hallucinations, seizures, and agitation have been reported in infants taking these products. It's likely unsafe when taken by mouth because it has chemicals that can be toxic. Lastly, from WebMD, the appropriate dose of belladonna depends on several factors, such as the user's age, health, and several other conditions. At this time, there is not enough scientific information to determine an appropriate range of doses for belladonna. As a side note, to give you something to think about, when the eye doctor dilates your eyes, belladonna is in the eye drops. So, Heather began getting dark ideas. She connected with this movie in a lot of ways. She decided to act on her ideas and make it a reality. She thought what was done in the movie was the only way she could manage to escape this marriage. Mindy said that Heather attempted to cast spells on Kevin to drive him away, but that didn't pan out. Heather came up with another plan and even told her friend Mindy and another neighbor, Diane, what her plan was in total detail. Heather was going to bid her husband farewell as he went to one of his jobs where he was working the night shift. She planned to make him a poisoned bowl of mashed potatoes, make a few phone calls to his work office. After that, Heather was going to seem worried about him and drive to his work, strategically pretending to be a damsel in distress after seeing her husband was deceased at his work desk due to a likely heart attack. Heather even told their babysitter, Nathan, who testified to this in court, that Kevin was worth more dead than alive, saying she even talked to him for a long time about her plot to garner his $750,000 life insurance and give Kevin a military funeral. In April of 2000, the now mother of 4 children set her scheme into motion. She did not really know what she was doing, and it's really good that she didn't. Heather made her way to a health food store, buying a bottle of belladonna pills. Of course, belladonna can kill someone if there's a lot of it, but the bottle that Heather bought might have just made Kevin go to sleep for a while and have indigestion, but she really thought this was going to do him in. Heather went home and finally crumpled all the belladonna pills until it was merely a pile of powder. She actually went to her friend Diane, who she had earlier told all of her plans to, asking her to keep the container that she put the belladonna powder in until she needed it. Needless to say, Diane was shocked and completely taken aback that she was now in possession of the belladonna, and of course now, this put her in a bad situation being legally tangled in this web. Diane did not know what to do. The next morning, she phoned Mindy and told her what was happening. There are questions around why she waited 24 hours to tell anyone, but in my opinion, I would have been scared to death and in shock. I don't find it suspicious that she waited, because the distress of what just happened probably shook her and took a while for reality to sink in. Mindy and Diane went to the police, who subsequently talked Mindy into wearing a wire while talking to Heather, hoping to get her to spill the tea about killing Kevin. When Mindy was talking to Heather, there was a plot twist that came out of this conversation. Heather spilled all the beans about crushing the pills, putting them in Kevin's mashed potatoes, and even the life insurance she was going to collect. Then the conversation took a turn. Heather began talking about the affair she was having. She was cheating on Kevin with Mindy. All of this was reportedly talked about while her children were playing in the same room. State troopers immediately went to Diane's house the next day to confiscate the belladonna. Before they made it to Diane's house, they arrested Heather while she was en route to Diane's. Heather ultimately admitted that she was fed up with Kevin's verbally abusive ways. She thought there was no other way out unless she killed him. Surprisingly, when the police told Kevin what his wife had up her sleeve, he would not press charges. Kevin even expressed that he was not upset, and he was sorry that he made Heather want to kill him. Kevin did not care that his wife hatched a plan to murder him. At least he never expressed that or acted like he was impacted by it. He was more upset that he was the reason she thought she needed to take him out as a way to solve her problems. In September of 2000, Heather and Kevin showed up to her trial holding hands. Kevin's family was certain that if given a chance, she would have gone through with her scheme, and she would have killed Kevin, or attempted to at the least. The family said he was so blinded by love, which makes me pose the question, if you found out that your significant other was planning to kill you, would you still love them enough to do what Kevin is doing? Now listen, I love my fiancé, but my answer would be an absolute hell no. I cannot wrap my mind around someone walking hand in hand with their partner who was plotting their murder and still have love for that person. Wow. The prosecutor, Michelle Henry, even said, I don't know why, when he has been confronted with all of this evidence, he still talked about cutting his brake line and hiring a hitman. She had a date, time, method, and mode of how she was going to do this. She got arrested while she was on the way to pick up the belladonna. This was a plan in motion. Heather took the stand, sporting a pink suit and braids with a bow. She even turned on her former mistress and so-called best friend, Mindy. She claimed that Mindy came up with the idea that she should take Kevin's life, and she never planned to really go through with it. It was just a fantasy. The trial lasted 4 days. The jury found Heather Miller guilty of attempted murder after 3 hours of deliberation. The judge sentenced Heather to 10 years imprisonment. According to the Morning Call, quote, Heather was not only convicted of attempted murder, but also solicitation to commit murder, aggravated assault, and simple assault, end quote. While she was incarcerated, to my total astonishment, phone calls were made to Kevin many times throughout the day, and they sent letters to each other every single day. Kevin made the trip to visit Heather at least one time out of the week. Heather talked to People magazine, saying, quote, in one aspect, I love him for it, but in the same breath, he must be completely insane. This shows me he actually, truly does love me. For the first time, I can say that I feel loved, end quote. So essentially, it took her attempting to kill off her husband, go to prison, and for him to do all of these things to actually make her feel loved. It absolutely blows me away. She only served 5 out of her 10-year sentence, and when she was free, she went back to her home that she shared with Kevin. As much as he tried to make things work with his wife who tried to kill him, he was still having trouble dealing with and coming to terms with what actually happened. The children were now 2, 3, 5, and 9 years old. Heather said she wasn't the only one serving the sentence for 5 years, but so were her children and Kevin. In 2016, Kevin was on an episode of Snapped on Oxygen and stated, quote, yeah, we all make mistakes, but it's a matter of owning those mistakes and moving forward from them. Looking back on it now, there are probably things that I wouldn't have done. It did not go the way I hoped it would. It made my life a whole lot more difficult than I would have rathered it, but it is what it is, end quote. Kevin and Heather eventually did get a divorce because despite Kevin trying so hard to keep them together, it just wasn't working. When Heather was released from prison, she never had any dealings with Mindy again. Mindy said, quote, "I hope she's well, and I hope that she has moved on in a positive life and done something awesome with herself. But I do wish her well," end quote. And that is the story of Heather Miller.
If you're a lesbian in Nebraska, where the hell are you supposed to find eligible women to date? The only answer I have to that question has to be online. But even more so, the question of how can an LGBTQ person live safely in Nebraska, that's what was really on my mind. So I did some searching. And I was surprised to find Nebraska, for being conservative and mostly a red Republican state, well, they had quite a bit of LGBTQ plus resources, especially in the bigger cities like Omaha and Lincoln. Yay! But it still seems like dating sites are the go-to places to meet someone. In 2017, Tinder was the dating app of choice for 24-year-old Sydney Loofe. Sydney worked at Menard's home improvement store in Lincoln, Nebraska. On November 11th of 2017, she matched with somebody on Tinder. Sydney swiped right for a 25-year-old cute brunette called Audrey. The app showed Audrey was only 32 miles away from where Sydney lived in Lincoln. The two women started exchanging messages and getting familiar with each other. You know, the introductory stage of the dating dance. It wasn't long before they began discussing meeting in person. 3 days after matching on Tinder, the two women would have their first date. Sydney did drop a text beforehand to Audrey. She wanted to make certain that Audrey wasn't going to surprise her with a boyfriend in tow. So she asked, "It's just going to be us, right?" You see, a very common thing for women on dating apps, especially bisexual women, is to post for a lesbian or another bisexual woman to join her and her man for a threesome. And sometimes that woman doesn't post about her man at all. It becomes a surprise a little later on. Sydney wasn't about this or surprises. She only ate from the taco truck. She was not going to the hot dog stand. And she didn't dine at both. Audrey assured Sydney it would be just them. They talked about having a nice dinner first, and then going to hang out at the Indian casino. But instead, they just smoked some weed and cruised around Lincoln, Nebraska. A couple hours later, Audrey would drop Sydney off at her house. When Sydney got home, she was excited to text her friends. She wanted to tell them how great her first date with Audrey went. In fact, it was so great, she couldn't wait for their next date. Audrey and Sydney were dropping more messages to each other, and they planned for their second date to be the following evening. It would be November 15th, 2017, after Sydney got off of work at Menard's. Before Sydney went on her second date with Audrey, she took a Snapchat of herself with the caption, "Ready for my date," and she posted it to a couple of friends and her mom. About 7 p.m., Audrey picked Sydney up. 6:54 p.m. was actually the last message Audrey had sent on Sydney's Tinder account. She was telling Sydney she was there at her home. Later that evening, Sydney's mom saw her Snapchat. She took a screenshot of it and she sent Sydney a message back. She said, "I didn't know you had a date." But Sydney didn't reply. So her mom went to bed. Sydney's family lived in Neely, Nebraska, which is where Sydney grew up. The following day, the 16th, Sydney didn't show up for her shift at Menard's. And this wasn't like Sydney at all. Sydney was responsible and reliable. If she was going to be late or not show, she definitely would have called in early. Worried, her work friends called Sydney's sister about her whereabouts. No friend or family member could get Sydney on her cell phone. It went right to her voicemail every single time. Sydney's mom called the police in Lincoln to request a welfare check at Sydney's apartment. When police got there, Sydney's SUV was in the driveway. They knocked, but no one answered. The police found an open window to crawl in through. and they looked around Sydney's place. They didn't see anything alarming, so they left. But they turned off the lights because every light was on. So that way, when their nighttime patrol would drive by, they could see if the lights were back on, which would mean that Sydney was most likely back home, because Sydney lived alone. Police weren't really too worried about Sydney, mostly because Sydney was an adult, and because there were no signs of foul play at her home. After that welfare check, her family still filed a missing persons report. Sydney's family knew that she had been battling depression and anxiety for all of her adult years. The week before meeting Audrey, Sydney had went to her family's home in Neely. She went to an arts and craft fair with the family. And that Monday after her visit, her parents went to Sydney's place in Lincoln. They were helping her to clean up her place, and they were going to accompany her to a doctor's appointment. This doctor was going to prescribe new medication to help Sydney with her depression. Sydney's good friend Brooklyn found out about Sydney's dates with Audrey, and she also found out that Sydney was missing, so she texted Sydney's sister. Sydney's sister sent Brooklyn Audrey's Tinder profile. Brooklyn had decided she was not going to follow the same approach as the police. She was going to be proactive in finding her friend. Brooklyn decided to make a catfish Tinder account to hunt this Audrey down. And I have to say, I love how Brooklyn thinks. I'm right there with her. Brooklyn put on her own profile everything that Audrey liked. And bam! Brooklyn was immediately matched with Audrey. Shortly after, Brooklyn and Audrey started to write each other. And in no time, Brooklyn had Audrey's phone number. Brooklyn took this information about Tinder app Audrey and her phone number to the Lincoln Police Department. She told them, "This is the woman who was last seen with her friend Sydney." The phone number turned out to be a fake phone number from one of those fake phone number apps. But from that number, the police were able to secure the real name of the person behind the fake number, and they also found it was the same person behind the Tinder profile. The police grabbed Sydney's phone records, and this showed them that her phone pinged in Wilbur, Nebraska. Wilbur's about 36 miles away from Lincoln. And Audrey was about 32 miles according to Tinder from Lincoln. Pretty close GPS there, Tinder. Audrey's fake phone number was the real number of a 23-year-old woman named Bailey Boswell. Police also came up with Bailey's apartment address in Wilbur. They quickly got on it and they paid Bailey a visit. Bailey and Bailey's boyfriend, who was over twice her age, quickly became persons of interest in Sydney's disappearance. His name was Aubrey. Kinda sounds like Audrey, doesn't it? He was 51-year-old Aubrey Trail. On the 19th of November, police were back at Bailey Boswell's place that she shared with Aubrey. This time, they had a search warrant. But there was no Bailey or Aubrey to serve the warrant to. There was a faint smell of bleach inside. The landlords had said the smell of bleach coming from Bailey and Aubrey's place, it was much stronger on the 16th. In fact, the smell was so strong, it made one of the landlords sick. Police said they thought that the walls looked like they had been cleaned down really well. But who were these sketchy people, Bailey Boswell and Aubrey Trail? As it turns out, both had prior records and current warrants out for their arrest. It was nothing violent, more like things along the lines of theft, drugs, possession of a firearm, and fraud. It seems the couple were scammers, con artists, grifters. They passed themselves off as antique dealers selling items on eBay and at antique consignment shops. As well, they'd go to auctions and write bad checks, and then they'd disappear with an expensive item. Bailey and Aubrey actually made a decent income doing this. Bailey had met Aubrey in 2016 when she was just 22. She was online looking for a sugar daddy, and together they started their relationship of scams and thievery for fun and profit. It gave them a chance to roleplay as well. Sometimes Bailey would dress the role of a wealthy young woman, and Aubrey would dress the role of her wealthy father. This couple thrived on fantasies, and I'll go more into that a little later. On November 30th, police started to ask for the public's help in finding Sydney, but no answers came forth. That same day, Bailey and her boyfriend Aubrey posted one of several videos to the Find Sydney Loofe Facebook page. Dressed in sunglasses and dark hoodies, they posted one of their latest videos. It looks like they did it while sitting in a car. In the video, Aubrey talks about the Lincoln Police Department and how they're trying to be cooperative with them, but the police continue to harass them. I'm not going to quote them word for word. I'm just going to paraphrase this trashy-ass couple. It was all, "Oh, poor them. Aren't people not supposed to be condemned guilty until they've had a fair trial?" Aubrey says, "Yeah, I'm not a good guy. I did time for check fraud and being a thief, but I've never done anything to the caliber of what I'm being accused of now. Boo-hoo, boo-hoo." Aubrey does most of the talking, and Bailey speaks out about Sydney and the 2 dates that she had with her. She says what a wonderful girl she thinks Sydney to be. Both Aubrey and Bailey claim they don't know where Sydney is. They admit to being with her at some point and then dropping her off at friends. At the end of the video, Aubrey says they hope Sydney is found soon, and they wish her family the best, and the Lincoln Police Department can go fuck themselves. And then Bailey flips the bird to the camera. They're such a sweet couple. Actually, my real thought when watching this is these two are either really stupid or they have huge ball sacks. As it turns out, they're pretty stupid. Police quickly located an IP address of where this video came from. The address led them to a motel in Branson, Missouri. And this is where the couple was arrested. But they weren't arrested for suspicions they had anything to do with Sydney missing. They were arrested for their outstanding warrants, because the police have nothing to arrest them on for Sydney's disappearance. But the other things they were able to arrest them for gets Bailey and Aubrey to the police station so they can be questioned about Sydney. Meanwhile, a Lincoln police investigator, he started to track the pings of Bailey's phone. Those pings led to the discovery of black plastic bags off the highway. This was about an hour west of Wilbur, Nebraska on December 4th. The first bag was found in a marsh that was thick with cattails. All in all, there were 13 bags found, and 13 of 14 pieces of Sydney's body that was found. The piece that is still missing is a section of Sydney's left arm. The persons of interest were now prime suspects in Sydney's murder. Aubrey Trail was being charged with first-degree murder and criminal conspiracy to commit murder. Bailey Boswell was charged with first-degree murder. But hold the phone. Let's see what else was unraveling with Aubrey Trail and Bailey Boswell. The story I promised to you was one about a witch cult, and I aim to deliver just that. How about I tell you, Aubrey Trail wasn't just a murder suspect. Aubrey Trail was daddy vampire to a witch cult, and Bailey Boswell was his queen witch. Get out of here with that nonsense, CJ. No, seriously. I know this all sounds like crazy shiz, but just get a load of this. Okay, so Aubrey and Bailey were arrested for Sydney's murder. During the trial, it came out that there were 3 other young women, and these women were a part of this witch cult. These women helped Aubrey and Bailey with their scamming and antique business. In return, the women were given a place to stay, money for shopping sprees, and a cut of whatever antiques were sold that week. Of course, there were rules for the coven. The women had to remain naked when in the home, and if they went out, they couldn't look at or show any interest in men. And lastly, They had to call or text Aubrey and Bailey every 3 hours just to check in. Punishment for non-compliance was they were to be whipped with a belt and have rough sex. The first woman Bailey drew in on Tinder was an 18-year-old who had just graduated high school. Her name is Anastasia Golyakova. Bailey introduced Anastasia to Aubrey. She said Aubrey is now your sugar daddy. Anastasia was instructed to call Aubrey daddy, and Bailey either mommy or mistress. Anastasia was digging the idea of a sugar daddy. She was trying to save up money to go to college, so she willingly joined this witches' coven, and she followed the rules for several weeks. It wasn't long before Bailey and Aubrey started to tell Anastasia their plan to make a snuff film. The couple thought they could make a massive amount of money doing this. They told Anastasia the three of them would take baseball bats and start beating someone, breaking their bones until they killed them. Anastasia wasn't down for this. Even though the couple assured her that the person they'd hurt, it would be a bad guy. Someone like a rapist. But Anastasia still wasn't about this, and she started to pull away some from the couple. Looking for a more willing participant, Bailey was back on Tinder, using the name Jenna this time. She reeled in a 20-year-old young woman named Ashley Hills. Ashley seemed much more innocent and gullible than Anastasia. Ashley believed Aubrey when he said he was a vampire. He told Ashley he could fly, he could read minds and hypnotize others with his brain power. She also believed Bailey was the queen witch. Ashley wanted so badly to be a witch too. Aubrey assured her she could be a witch, but she'd have to kill another woman and breathe in her last breath. And if Ashley wanted even stronger powers that came with being a witch, she'd have to torture the woman she killed. Ashley did her best to talk herself into doing this. She took a trip to a local Walmart with Aubrey and Bailey. They found their next victim, but something happened and the plan had been thwarted that day. Meanwhile, Anastasia had been pissing Aubrey off by going against the house rules. Anastasia told Ashley that Aubrey and Bailey weren't what they seemed. Aubrey could tell Anastasia wasn't as invested in him and Bailey anymore, so Aubrey made the executive decision. Anastasia would need to die, and she was the one that Ashley could murder and take her last breath from. In preparation for that big day, Bailey took Ashley on a shopping spree. During it, Ashley had a huge anxiety attack, and she decided she couldn't go through with killing anyone. In the end, Aubrey and Bailey released both Anastasia and Ashley, but both of the young women were told if they uttered a single word to anyone about any of what had just gone on, their family would be killed. The women believed the couple and stayed quiet. With a dwindling coven, Bailey went back to Tinder looking for more recruits. She found 21-year-old Katie Brandel. Katie was honestly just looking for a relationship on Tinder, but she found Bailey instead. Katie started talking to Bailey on Halloween of 2017, just 2 weeks before Bailey found Sydney on Tinder. Bailey started to talk to Katie about BDSM. Bailey would be the dom and Katie would be the submissive. Katie was definitely curious and open to the idea. Bailey then introduced Katie to Aubrey and the rules of the house. Katie, a lesbian, had zero sexual interest in Aubrey, but she was made to give him massages. Bailey told Katie if she wanted to be involved with her, she had to be involved with Aubrey. Katie was not overjoyed with this prospect, but she really wanted Bailey. So she did as she was told. She gave Aubrey massages and blowjobs. Bailey wanted Katie to scream in pain every time they had sex, and Bailey really got off on the thought someone she was with was hurting. The couple talked to Katie about torture and murdering someone with them. They also talked about witches and vampires. Katie thought this was all just part of their sexual role-playing fantasies. Katie remained part of this odd coven until November 14th. This is when Bailey dropped her off at her home in Omaha, Nebraska. Katie and Bailey had gotten into a fight because Katie wouldn't quit her job and just be with Bailey and Aubrey only. This was the very same day as Bailey's first date with Sydney, which brings us back to where we were. Aubrey and Bailey were being held on their theft, firearm possession, drug, and fraud charges. They'd been jailed for nearly a year before they were charged formally with Sydney's murder. It seemed investigators were having a hell of a time finding evidence to tie Aubrey and Bailey to Sydney's murder. The couple cleaned their apartment up so well, CSI couldn't find anything. Technology was really the only thing in favor of the investigators in this case. It might have only been circumstantial evidence, but it was strong circumstantial evidence, and the prosecutor thought it could withstand a court trial. Plus, prosecution uncovered 3 witnesses who were very willing to testify against their daddy vampire and mistress. Yep, the coven was coming forward. The circumstantial evidence consisted of phone records and CCTV footage. Phone records of Sydney's pinged in Bailey and Aubrey's apartment the 15th before her phone was shut off. This placed Sydney in the couple's home the night she was last seen by her friends at work. But then again, the couple admitted Sydney was in their home that night, even if no trace of her could be found at their place. Bailey's phone pinged where the bags of Sydney's body parts were found. And this is a little creepy, but CCTV footage of Menard's home improvement store where Sydney worked shows Aubrey following Sydney around when she showed up for her shift that day she had her second date with Bailey. Sydney doesn't even realize there's somebody following her around, let alone it's some dude that's going to end up killing her. Later that day, CCTV footage of Aubrey and Bailey was found at Home Depot in Wilbur. It shows the couple buying tarps, handsaws, and a bunch of bleach. They were also seen on CCTV footage buying a vintage meat grinder and a weed whacker at an antique store. In 2018, Aubrey and Bailey were charged and found guilty of 14 counts each of various federal crimes. This had nothing to do with Sydney. Both Aubrey and Bailey received 5 to 10 years for those crimes. Finally, in 2019, Aubrey's court trial for the murder of Sydney would begin. Aubrey would maintain his innocence. Aubrey claimed Sydney's death was accidental from erotic asphyxiation during a consensual sexual orgy. Yeah, sure, Aubrey. He claimed the only thing he was guilty of was disposing of her body. The whole trial was quite the dramatic one. First, like I said, it didn't start until 2019. And it ended sometime last year in 2020. After Aubrey's arrest, he suffered 2 heart attacks, a stroke, and he was wheelchair bound. He had to be rolled into court in his chair. Daddy Vampire be illin'. And his witches cult? Well, it had just fallen apart. Aubrey's trial was going to be a very long court scene. There were 13 full pages of witnesses scheduled to appear. At one point of the trial, Aubrey found some type of sharp object. It's believed to have been part of a razor blade. All of a sudden, he yells, "Bailey is innocent, and I curse you all!" He then slashes his own neck twice, and then he falls out of his wheelchair onto the floor. He didn't cause enough self-harm to himself to be in any grave danger. A quick trip to the hospital and some My Little Pony Band-Aids later, he was good to go. Okay, he might have needed a little more than that, but not much more. However, after that outburst, that big old baby tantrum of his, Aubrey was kept out of the courtroom until it was time for him to testify. The 3 witches from his coven testified Aubrey and Bailey tried to get them to commit torture and murder of unsuspecting victims. And at least one of those witches testified to seeing a kill kit that the couple kept with them. Aubrey continued to deny killing Sydney. He stuck to his story that she died by a sex act gone terribly wrong. He said he was choking her out with electrical cord when she had a seizure and died. He didn't call 911 because of his criminal past. He didn't think anyone would believe him that it was an accident. When the trial was over, the jury deliberated. They came back with a guilty of murder in the 1st degree. Nice try, Aubrey, but there's a video of you purchasing bleach, tarps, saws, and a meat grinder before Sydney even left work at Menard's that fateful evening she was murdered. This proved forethought, premeditation. Sydney's death was not an accident. At his sentencing trial, Aubrey was sentenced to death. But after 2 heart attacks, a stroke, and slicing his own neck, we'll have to see if he actually makes it long enough to be executed by the state of Nebraska. His body might shut down on him first. Just last month, Aubrey had requested to fire his attorneys. He wishes to represent himself now. He was denied self-representation, and it still remains to be seen if he will appeal his verdict. Bailey, the Queen Witch, went through her trial. She was also found guilty of 1st-degree murder, in spite of psychiatrists coming to her defense saying that she also was a victim of Aubrey Trail. Bailey's sentencing hearing won't be until November of this year. That's just next month. Paige and I will have to update you on the outcome. Rest in power, Sydney. Love you, Rainbow Warriors. Remember, it's not a crime to be gay, unless you're a murderer.